Hi there. So it's likely if you're looking at this video, the title of the video caught your attention. Um, I know the nature of YouTube. Sometimes people comment without even listening to anything. I'm guilty of it myself. I've done it once or twice, but I do want to make a disclaimer here at the very beginning, just so there are no misunderstandings. Um, when I'm talking about conspiracy theorists, in this context, militant conspiracy theorists, I'm talking about a particular way of thinking. I am not talking about people who question power. I am not talking about people who question the official versions of things. Okay. I think that's healthy, actually, within reason. I think that asking questions is very healthy. Thinking outside the box is healthy, not just blindly following the crowd. I'm on board with all of that as a principle. I think it's a good thing. So if you're sort of getting defensive and saying, "Oh, I mean, I remember someone once came to me and said, "Oh, the CIA invented that word to try and demean people." I don't know if that's true or not. If the CIA invented the term conspiracy theorist, but I think there is a range actually between people who legitimately have questions versus people who are way, way, way down the rabbit hole in a whole other area, which I'll be talking about. But I do think I certainly don't think everyone who might be called a conspiracy theorist or calls himself a conspiracy theorist or otherwise is on the same sort of scope of thinking. I don't believe that. It's interesting though that the term has become sort of negative. It's interesting that those who, I mean, let's break it down a little bit. Conspiracy theory, right? So the idea that something has a deeper meaning, something has some sort of deeper agenda behind what is obvious on the surface. I mean, it almost always relates to the notion of some sort of cover up or abuse of power or something even more sinister. And here's the thing, some conspiracy theorists, or excuse me, some conspiracy theories have ultimately turned out to be true, um, or at least partly true. And there are some that have actually gained traction over the year and got more mainstream appeal. For example, today, there is a sizable portion of Americans do not believe that a lone gunman shot JFK. That's obviously one of the better known ones. There's others. There's the moon landing hoax theory. There's the Princess Diana death theories. There's 9/11 theories. There's would be some of the better known ones, but there's others. Some are more on the um, maybe not quite so important geopolitically. For example, um, Paul McCartney died in 1966 in a car crash is an interesting one and was replaced by a lookalike and things like this. And there are many, many, many conspiracy theories out there. Now, I'm not going to lie. I find the subject somewhat interesting. I'm not just saying that because I used to be a big fan of the X-Files, but it can be quite intriguing, this idea that there is something more out there than the official version. It can be genuinely intriguing. I like history, and considering that there may actually be something alternative that happened rather than the official account can always be interesting. But I think there's a fine line between something that's interesting and something that provokes interesting questions versus people allowing themselves to become basically to allow themselves to get this very dystopian worldview where they question absolutely everything. Now, and that's what I want to talk about. When people get to the point, because here's the thing: if you say, "Well, we can't trust mainstream media; it's all lies, it's all a globalist agenda," what's to stop you saying, "Oh, well, everything's a lie. Every institution is a lie," right? And if you really want to go down that path, then it actually becomes quite difficult to function in society because you're questioning absolutely everything. It even makes it difficult to do a regular job because whatever company you work for is going to be part of that big globalist plot that you're so against. Um, I mean, I straddle somewhere between feeling sorry for people who go down this path versus a fair bit of resentment because I think the way they go about it is not civil and is not reasonable, and sometimes it can be downright callous. I'm talking about, for instance, people who will, because they're convinced that a terrorist attack hasn't happened or is an inside job, they will go to the point, and this has actually happened, they will go to the point of harassing survivors of said attack and calling them crisis actors, which to me is disgusting. It's appalling because, what they are doing is they're trying to target people, harass people who've already been through a terrible, terrible ordeal, and then they have to put up with some stranger, filming outside the house to prove that they're a crisis actor. This actually happened in the UK to survivors of the Manchester Arena bombing. So, instead of accepting that an Islamist extremist carried out this attack, no, it has to be some deeper plot. It's just, I just despair at that way of thinking. Perhaps nothing in recent years has galvanized this sort of discourse more than the pandemic and the whole mask and vaccine debate. Now, I want to be very clear here. I think there are some very legitimate contentions to be made about some of the policies that were adopted. I think that there is evidence that lockdown caused a lot of problems. I think it certainly caused depression, probably suicides, probably an increase in domestic violence. I think there were a lot of problems with that. And the vaccine issue, I'm personally vaccinated, and I had barely any side effects. I think the third one I got a mild flu for a night. Vaccines have saved lives. It's an empirical fact that vaccines have saved lives. I mean, look at polio. Polio's almost been eradicated around the world. It's left only in 2 or 3 countries now. Smallpox was eradicated. Um, Vaccines save lives. But I don't say that if people are uneasy about injecting something in themselves that they are therefore conspiracy. No. Where I draw a line is when they start imposing that dogma onto other people to the point of, and I know of this from people I've known in my personal life. I won't go into the details because that's not the point of this video. It's not, to name and shame people. But I know people that I've been acquainted with, who rather than just saying, okay, I don't want to take the vaccine because I don't trust it, I don't trust these big pharma companies, which is fine, it's a legitimate viewpoint, they actually go to the point of trying to pressure other people not to take it and to bully them not to take it and so on. And that crosses a line. Um, and in the case of the pandemic, I think there's an argument to be made that there is a selfishness about that way of thinking because it isn't just about whether or not it protects them, it's actually about other people. But quite frankly, there is contradictory information out there. I'm not going to say that the whole official narrative is accurate because it isn't. There has been some U-turns, there has been some retrospectives. I would say that the pandemic was an exceptional event. There's been deadlier pandemics in history. The Black Death and the 1918 influenza killed more people. This does rank as one of the bigger ones. Certainly, of modern times, it's you know um, anywhere from 7 to 20 million people died in this, and even that gets into question of, well, what was the primary cause of death and all the rest of it. I think everyone can agree, whether it was engineered by the New World Order or whether it was a deadly virus, it was a major event in so many ways. I think everyone can agree with that. Um, but I just notice that I was going to say what I want to say, but to be honest, that's a waste of time. Okay, I'm not trying to convert people here. If if there are people who are very much of the worldview that I'm talking about, absolute enough, and I say will convince them otherwise. And that's one of the dangers with this. When you start going down, the term rabbit hole probably isn't even a good euphemism, but it's obviously relating to Alice in Wonderland and those stories. But I don't think that even sums it up because, I've seen examples of people who start questioning, and that's totally valid and fair, but then they never stop questioning, and absolutely everything becomes a conspiracy to the point where it's actually quite, I would have thought for them, draining. I'm thinking, chill out, go and watch a film, go and do something you enjoy. Not every damn thing is sinister. The world has a lot of problems. There's bad things out there. There is corruption, there's greed, there is cruelty, there's abuse of power, there's all of those things. Yeah. I mean, certainly I've railed against what I think of the justice system. So I'm not sitting from some place of complacency where I'm happy with everything. And, I think that I do feel that these things grow when people feel polarized, when they feel alienated, and when they feel that the, the powers to be just are not listening. I do think that galvanizes it for sure. And then when you get big networks like the BBC caught in lies, it definitely doesn't help. Even then, it's like take a step back, okay? Because an important point with all of this is they make a very big thing about doing their own homework and their own research. And whenever they're challenged, they'll say, "Oh, I've done my research. You're a sheep, you just follow the mainstream media." But I would say, okay, you've done your research. Now, what's to say that the source that you're looking at is true? What's to say the source that you're looking at isn't full of it? Okay, so are you talking about a whistleblower? Well, maybe he or she is telling the truth. Or maybe they're full of it. Maybe they're just a disgruntled employee. You know, the principle here is that they put a big, big focus on being truth tellers and not following the crowd and doing their own homework. They're not critical of their own sources. They never sort of say, well, okay, I don't trust the official narrative, but this sounds a bit outlandish, I don't really believe it. Usually what I hear from them is along these lines. Oh, I used to be just like you. I used to think it was all rubbish, but then I done my own research, and now I know the truth. But do you really? I mean, can any of us know the absolute truth all the time? I'm not so arrogant that I think I do. I know there's a lot of things out there that I don't know, that I need to research. And in fact, as a journalist, I have to. I haven't formally started my work with that yet, but I know that when I do, that will be a big part of the job. I mean, it's essential. The absolute first priority of any journalist is tell the truth. That's that goes above anything else. Um, and with that, research is essential. That's why journalism is not an easy profession. So what have I got myself into? But anyway, I honestly think, if you're waking up and you're thinking, okay, so all the mainstream media is a pack of lies, they're all corrupt, they're all liars, they're all working for the New World Order, whatever. Um, Vaccines are all part of a population control agenda. Okay, so that's evil, that's terrible. All governments are working together for one world government. That's evil, that's terrible. Okay. At some point, you start saying, well, is there any institution that you trust? Is there any public body that you trust at all? Or is everything just some massive plot? And the thing is, we saw with QAnon, we saw what happened on the January the 6th incident. And I know that that's been somewhat weaponized by the Democrats, but it wasn't, I don't accept it was just a riot that got out of hand. I think there's evidence that there was a concerted, premeditated thing going on there with some of those QAnon people. And there was one young guy whose father was very much he was a militia type. I think he was an oath keeper actually. And this young man and his mother basically had to get out of there because, as he described him, he was a psychological terrorist. That's how he described his father. And I could well believe that because, when you're living with someone who's stocking up for the impending doomsday and planning a militant attack on the United States Capitol because he believes this is patriotic duty, you're dealing with someone who is beyond reason. So, but what I find incredible is you can literally show this sort of conspiracy theorists the facts. You can literally show it to them, and they still will not believe it. Oh, you've just made that up. It's fake news. In other words, they're not free thinking. They're not objective. They have got into an extremely dogmatic tunnel vision that they're right and everyone else is wrong. And if you don't agree with them, you're an idiot or you're just brainwashed by the mainstream media. Now, I am not saying that everyone who follows these sort of theories is an idiot. That's not my position. But I do think when you get to the point where you cannot think critically about your own sources, and this is the important thing about your own sources, about your own worldview, then you can't really lecture others about being free thinking. And this is the thing, they're not happy just having their own opinions. They always want to push it onto others. I know this because I've experienced people like this who will not let it go. They'll just want to ram it down your throat. And it's like, you believe what you want, but don't bring me on that bandwagon, on that little trip that you're taking, because I'm not. I've looked at the information, I've looked at the different viewpoints, and I just think you're going down a tunnel that I think it's a very, very dystopian and dark worldview. To have that amount of cynicism and that level of mistrust, I do partly feel sorry for them, but that sympathy fades away when they start harassing survivors of terror attacks or insulting people who have survived awful things, or forcing their views onto others. It's just, I mean, I guess they would argue that the majority forces views onto them, but um, what I would say there is in a free society, there should be a plurality of opinions. I certainly don't think these people should be censored unless they're breaking the law. I do think if they're spreading misinformation, I mean, that conversation I quote between Elon Musk and the guy at the BBC, Musk asked an important question: who fact checks the fact checkers? Right? This is something that's been brought up time and time again. It's a fair question, but the problem is that's a never-ending argument. Okay, so then need someone to fact check the fact checkers. Then you need someone to fact check the fact checkers who are fact checking the fact checkers. It just becomes endless. And the problem with that is if you don't have some sort of authority, if you don't have some, even if we don't want to use that word authority, if you don't have some sort of accountability, it just becomes the Wild West. It just becomes a free for all where anyone can say anything they want without responsibility. And that's something I have a problem with because if people are regurgitating nonsense, especially if there are people in a position of power, like the former president of the United States, and impressionable people are taken in by that. I think the current approach of putting a disclaimer is a reasonable compromise. It's not censoring it, it's not taking it away, but it's saying that this is inaccurate information. Or something YouTube's taken to doing, and I actually agree with this, is when they have news networks, whether it be Al Jazeera or RT or the BBC. Actually, RT is totally down now, but they've taken to saying this is an organ of the whatever government it is. I think that's reasonable. It's not censoring it. People can still watch the video and make their own mind up, but it is saying that that's the basis of this. That's where it's coming from. I think that's reasonable. I agree with that approach. Because it isn't censoring, it isn't denying people information. Rather, it's providing more context. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, but I've dealt with a few of these people on my own channel, and their arguments usually consist of you're an idiot, you're brainwashed. And they'll point to X, Y, and Z sources, and sometimes I've humored them. I've checked out the sources. But it's always this, how can I put it? It's this vortex of overt negativity and cynicism, and every damn thing it has some sort of agenda or plot. You can't believe that, you can't believe that, you can't believe that. It's all a massive plot. That's not a rational way to think. The world is troubled, but it's not that bad. It's not. I mean, seriously, these people need to take a chill pill, step back a little bit, and consider, is it really, really as dark as I'm making it out to be? Is it really this Orwellian? And if you believe that it is, I don't know, I feel sorry for you. Final point, of course, it's healthy to question things. You know, there's nothing worse than herd mentality. Of course, it's important to question things. It's important that people think critically. It's one of the things that Macron got right on his visit to China. He spoke to some students apparently and said that it's important to think critically. He got other things wrong. He's, that's another video. He's sending out the wrong message on Taiwan, but he was right about that. But thinking critically doesn't mean that you need a saying that everything is an agenda, because it isn't, or everything has some sinister meaning, sinister deeper meaning, because it doesn't. That's not thinking critically. That's thinking irrationally. That's thinking. That's allowing cynicism and mistrust to go out on steroids, to just spread like wildfire to the point of no return. Because when you start convincing yourself that that is the way the world is, you're not going to believe anything. And in the end, what are you going to win? What are you going to succeed? What are you going to gain from that? You're just going to be miserable. So if anyone who is maybe, let's say, not the full-on militant school of thought that I've been talking about, if you're sort of halfway there, I implore you, please, 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 just step back a little bit, just a little bit, and accept that not everything is a conspiracy. Not everything is this dark utopian, excuse me, dystopian hellscape, because it's not. You know, the world is most certainly not run by reptilian shapeshifters. Now, I think most people, even most conspiracy theorists, would say, yeah, sure, that's nonsense. But this is the problem. When you start believing one thing, you'll believe anything. You'll get into a point where, and I suppose they can make a counter argument, well, that's true if you're listening to mainstream media. But for the record, I don't blindly believe everything the BBC says, certainly not. There's many things about the BBC I don't like. The same of CNN. Okay, so I don't think that I'm blindly following them. But would I trust the BBC more than someone who is stockpiling for the coming Armageddon? Overall, yeah, I would. Because as much as there are dishonest people there, as much as there has been abuse of power, as much as there is arrogance and partisan sentiments, I think fundamentally there's a degree of rationality there that you don't get with militant conspiracy types. Anyway, I'll wrap this up. I accept this video might be insulting to some people, but you know what? If they think they have a right, their free speech to pontificate and push these things, then they should accept that others are going to counter it. And no, I'm not a CIA operative. I'm not a puppet of the Illuminati. I'm not. I'm just an ordinary guy who doesn't like that sort of dogma that you guys are promoting and girls are promoting. It's um sad, and I think it could be downright callous. I mean, seriously, what sort of person harasses a survivor of a terrorist attack? And the interesting thing is, the guy that done that, I'll just very briefly mention this, that this is the other thing I don't like about militant conspiracy theories. They think they've got a right to ask everyone else questions, to, do their research, but when questions are asked of them, they whine about being persecuted. So it's a bit of they can give, but they can't take, which is, you know, not not good. It's immature at best.